Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be making an enclosure for Prehistoric Kingdom's latest edition, the Plateosaurus. And here you can see it in all its glory. What a beautiful design they've done once again. Beautiful patterns, and you can see there as I go back from male to female, the male is a little larger. But they have spoilt us because we don't only have one Plateosaurus, we have two different species, and you can see this one here is a lot larger. The other one was pretty much, I think, up to here on the human. Let's have a look. The female is a little bit smaller in this one as well. And with this species we have two different patterns. So if we go to this one, you can see that's a beautiful pattern. Looks more like suited to a desert kind of environment, this pattern. Whereas this one, I think you'd say a bit more lush and forests and things like that. So I'm going to go with this pattern here. I think this is my favourite out of these two, and we're going to go for the larger species as well. So without further ado, let's get to it and build this Plateosaurus a home. So let us begin. The first thing I'm going to build for this enclosure is a waterfall inspired by walking with dinosaurs. In the first episode, we go back in time to the Triassic period, and at the end of that episode, there is an incredible scene of a huge herd of Plateosaurus walking down a river on top of a beautiful waterfall. It's a brilliant scene, it really is. Very dramatic. We see some small coelophysis by the side of the waterfall drinking, and then next minute these huge dinosaurs, these Plateosaurus, come walking around the corner. The coelophysis are like, what the hell is this? And the Plateosaurus very dramatically lifts himself up and splashes the water, making a bit of a threatening display to warn the coelophysis, back off. And the coelophysis go running off, they scurry away, terrified, and it's just a brilliant way to end the episode. And I can't believe it, it's 25 years old and it still holds up today. So I thought, you know what, this scene really stuck with me. I can't make a Plateosaurus enclosure without trying my very best to build that waterfall and put it in. So you can see I put the coelophysis at the side there and the Plateosaurus on the top, and this is just to give me a sense of scale. I don't want to make the waterfall and then put the animals in and think, oh my goodness, it's too big or it's too small. So I put the animals in just to give me an idea of how big. I always put the animals in anyway when I'm making any enclosure, just so I can get a sense of just how large I'm making it. And I'm also looking at pictures here of the actual episode to try and get that waterfall to look as similar as I can to the actual waterfall from the episode. And the waterfall is pretty much finished now, actually. And you know what? I think it looks rather good. All I've got to do now is put a few bushes around the side and a bit of vegetation, because when you look at the actual shot that they film it in, there's a lot of vegetation in the background and a lot of vegetation at the side of the waterfall. So I'm going to put that in now and just put in a few rocks just to finish it up. And you know what, I'm rather happy with that actually. I think it looks rather good. Now I'm just putting in the river that the Plateosaurus come marching down, and then once all that's done we can move on with the rest of the enclosure. But let's take a look at some of the facts of this animal, of the Plateosaurus. So as we saw earlier in the game, they've actually put in two different species of Plateosaurus. First up we have the Triassic genus, which is the larger species of the two. This animal could reach 4.8 to 10 meters in length. So this is a very large animal, and weight-wise we have 600 kilograms to 4,000 kilograms, so that's 4 tons. And there's a very wide variation there in weight and in length, and I wonder if this could be maybe the age of the animal, the species that they've unearthed, or maybe it's to do with male and female, because when we look at animals today, a lot of male animals will be a lot larger when you look at things like bison and elephants and things like that, and the females tend to be a little smaller, so I wonder if that's why there's a big variation in weight and length. But then we have the smaller species. This species is named gracilis, formerly known as Coelophysis gracilis. And this is an older species, and I'm guessing that's why it was a little bit smaller, because when we look at dinosaurs when they first started out, they were very, very small at the beginning of the Triassic. They tend to grow into larger animals like the Plateosaurus at the end of the Triassic. The Jurassic, they go absolutely enormous into the huge sauropods that we see. And then they get even bigger as we go into the Cretaceous. So it's taking time for them to evolve into such large animals. So there must have been a split at some point when the Triassic genus split off from the gracilis. And the gracilis must have died out, and that's probably because it's a smaller animal and a much more easier target for predators. The gracilis is only 4 to 5 meters long compared to the Triassic genus, which was 4.8 to 10 meters long. Now, if I was a predator and I was going out hunting, I know that I would rather choose the smaller and easier prey to tackle rather than going for the really large, big ones. But Plateosaurus didn't stop evolving there. It kept going, just as all dinosaurs did. And Plateosaurus is a very special dinosaur because Plateosaurus is a basal sauropodomorph dinosaur, also known as a prosauropod. Now, some scientists believe that Plateosaurus is actually an early ancestor of sauropods. So when you look at the evolutionary tree, Plateosaurus is near the base of the stem that led to the development of large, long-necked sauropods, which means that all sauropods, Argentinosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, they can all trace their family history back to this dinosaur. It's crazy to think, when you think about it, that an animal of 4 tons could later down the line, well, millions of years later, evolve into an animal that could weigh 70 to 80 tons. It really does baffle your mind when you think about it, doesn't it? God, crazy. Anyway, on with the rest of the build. As you can see here, we are building a bridge, and what I want to do here is I want to really immerse the guests in the enclosure, make them feel like they're in the enclosure with the dinosaurs, but obviously keeping them safe. So as you can see, I've built this bridge that is connected to this platform on top of this rock, and I want to have a few of these dotted through the exhibit, and the guests can walk over on bridges and platforms and get a good look in the enclosure and get a good look at the dinosaurs, rather than just peeking from the sides of the enclosure. And this means you can make the enclosure bigger for the dinosaurs, so they've still got the space they need, but the guests can still walk inside the enclosure and get a good look at them. And I'm just putting a few rocks here around the side of the river, because you find rivers tend to have a lot of rocks washed up at the sides, a lot of pebbles that have eroded down as that river's been flowing. A lot of rocks would have broken off this waterfall, and then the power of the river would have carried them down, and some of them would have been scattered around the sides here.
And I'm just putting in another little mini waterfall here, not a really big one, just where the water is starting to fall down to another layer. I tell you what, making waterfalls on this game is very, very difficult. Trying to make it look natural is really quite a challenge. But it is worth putting in your enclosures because it does make it a bit more interesting, and they do look very, very pretty. So there's our mini little waterfall, just the water cascading down, and you can see we're putting in a bridge now to another platform on that big boulder. And this water is going to flow through this little mini canyon. So I'm putting lots of stones and pebbles down here, another big rock here. So this is, imagine this water going through here. It's going to be quite moist and damp. So what I need to do is put plenty of mini plants in. All these plants that are growing in the nooks and crannies, getting their roots in those gaps. And if you ever look around waterfalls, you'll notice there's lots of different ferns and mosses and things like that growing around them, because as the waterfall is cascading down, it creates a lot of mist, and that mist is going to blow and then gather on the rocks, which will give these plants plenty of water. So we're just making it look really overgrown here. Put a few more pebbles in and a few more rocks. Beautiful. And that is our little mini canyon finished. We'll just put a few more plants in around these gaps here just to fill it all in, make it look as natural as possible. Lovely. Now, you'll notice in this enclosure we don't just have one dinosaur, we have two. We have the most recent, which is the Plateosaurus, and we also have another animal, the coelophysis. Now, the reason I've decided to put these two together is because they actually would have lived together in the wild in the Triassic period. So these dinosaurs lived at the same time in the same location, so they would have come across each other when they were alive. And you may be thinking, why have I put a predator with prey? Well, the reason I've done this is because I think that Plateosaurus is just too big for a coelophysis to take on. Even if we have a whole pack of them, I don't think they would stand a chance, because when you look at the coelophysis next to the Plateosaurus, they're just puny. They're absolutely tiny animals. In fact, we'll actually get up the size of these creatures right now. Okay, let's have a look at the length of this animal first. So we're looking at 3 meters long, 1 meter tall, and weighing around 23 to 43 kilograms, so quite a lightweight animal. When you compare this to the Plateosaurus, that could weigh up to 4 tons and 10 meters long, yes, I don't think they'd really stand a chance. But the length actually of the Plateosaurus, it did say 4.8 meters to 10 meters long. So maybe, I don't know, they could maybe take on the younger individuals, definitely the babies. And also we have that smaller species of Plateosaurus, which was 4 to 5 meters long, the gracilis. So maybe, I don't know, they could have stood a chance with the smaller species, but I remember with the Walking with Dinosaurs scene at the end when the Plateosaurus came by, this huge herd, the coelophysis just ran off. They were like, no, we're not chancing it with you, you're too big. So, especially if they were in a herd as well. So yes, I think we'll be all right putting the coelophysis in here with the Plateosaurus. I think they should get on quite well, hopefully, fingers crossed. But yes, as you can see, I've just been putting in a nice little viewing platform. And you can see there I've just put some food in front of that platform to try and attract the animals over so the guests get a good view. I give them some vegetables and some fruit. I do need to put some meat out for the coelophysis. I'm not sure where to put it yet. But yeah, that should hopefully bring the animals over and the guests can get a really good look of those Plateosauruses. So let's talk a little bit about the time period of when these dinosaurs lived back in the Triassic period. The first chapter really for dinosaurs, when they first really started to take over the world. So this period began 252 million years ago and it ended 201 million years ago. So this period in time lasted a whole 50 million years, which is a very, very long time. And Plateosaurus and the coelophysis would have lived during this time period together. And what's interesting is that the continents at this time were all joined together. So it's one big supercontinent called Pangaea. So when you look at the world map today and you can see there's South America, North America, Africa, Europe, Asia and Australia, all these were not split up by oceans. They were all together in one big huge landmass. So everyone knew everybody really. There was nothing separating anybody. And then it began to split up during the Jurassic period. But yeah, it was a very harsh landscape, very dry and very, very hot. So in the centre of the continent was dominated by huge deserts, and closer to the edges it's estimated that they would have had more forests and things like this because they would have got more rain as the water evaporated from the sea and got blown inwards. So it would have rained more on the outskirts of the continent. In the centre would have just been huge deserts, very hot, very dry and very hard to survive for any animals that were living during this time period. Going back to the Walking with Dinosaurs first episode, I remember them talking about seasonal droughts and that the rains hadn't come on time and animals were really struggling to survive. And then eventually, at the very end, the rains finally come, the rivers start flowing and that waterfall starts to run. The landscape is turned green with lush vegetation, and that's when the Plateosaurus arrive. It's almost like they knew it was coming, that they'd migrated from somewhere to get to this lush landscape when the rains had finally come. And as you can see, I'm just putting on the railings of that huge bridge that we've put going through the enclosure to make sure none of the guests fall off into the exhibit. And here I'm just going to put on some nice, these are supposed to be for animal shelters, but I thought, you know what, these look quite nice on the bridge, and it should give our guests a bit of shade as well if they want to stop on the bridge here and look over into the enclosure. It might get a bit hot for them, so it'll give them a bit of shade. And I'm trying to put in plants here that suit the theme of the Triassic period. It was dominated back then by things like cycads, conifers, horsetails, things like ferns as well. But I'm also using other plants as well that just look cool, that suit the theme, because I do want it to look pleasing when you look at it. When you look into this enclosure, I want you to go, wow, that looks really nice. So I am putting in other plants that probably aren't accurate, but as long as they suit the theme, as long as they give off Triassic vibes, that's all that really matters. Actually, do you know what? I take that back. As long as none of the plants are poisonous is what I should have said. Otherwise, we may have another incident like Jurassic Park, where one of the Triceratops gets ill because it's eaten a poisonous plant that was inside its enclosure. and they have to check through the dinosaur's dung to make sure it hasn't eaten the poisonous plant. I can't remember the name of the plant now, but I remember Ellie Sattler, she warns John Hammond when they're all having dinner together. She says, you pick plants here that look good, but you don't know what effect that will have on the animals that live in these enclosures. And then later on she's proved right, because they find out that one of the Triceratops has become ill. So yeah, as long as we choose plants that aren't poisonous, then that should be good. Do you know what would be interesting though? To make an enclosure that's completely scientifically accurate by making sure that all the plants in there are the type of plants that that animal would have actually lived with. So that would take a lot of research though. I'd have to check all the plants and then try and find them on this game. Hopefully they would be on the game. But yeah, I think that'd be something quite interesting to do. I might do that. I might make a video on it one day in the future. If you'd be interested in that, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know what time period you'd like to see. And here we're just going to put in some fencing to make sure that nobody wanders over the cliff there and hurts themselves. We don't want any lawsuits. Blend in that cliff with a bit of texture. Lovely. It's all coming together. Lovely stuff. And we'll just put in a few benches here on the bridge in the shade in case anybody wants to sit down, wants to just sit back and relax and watch the dinosaurs getting along with their day. Marvellous. And we'll just put some benches on the other side as well, make sure there's plenty of seating area available. And then we'll put in some bins to make sure that the park is kept nice and tidy. And I do hope that's one of the next things that the staff are going to be able to do. The maintenance team, I hope, will be able to change the bins and pick up rubbish in the park, because at the moment all they do is restock the shops. So I think that maybe in the future the team will give them a few more jobs to do. So as I was saying, I'm trying to make this enclosure look as Triassic as possible. So I've got to make sure that we get the right balance here. I'm trying to make this look like it could be a desert in the dry season, but in the wet season it's very lush and got lots of plants growing everywhere. So I've used desert rocks, and you can see I put sand down on the floor, but then we're going for all these tropical plants. And you wouldn't think these two would go, really, would you? You wouldn't think that desert and jungle would really mix. But as long as you find that fine line of mixing them, you know, just putting the plants around the rock edges and the nooks and crannies where the roots could get in, then it works. Lovely stuff. It's really coming along now. You can see the exhibit starting to take shape. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet is the Plateosaurus's enemies. What dinosaurs were hunting this animal? Well, it certainly wasn't the coelophysis, because they are far too small to take on such a big animal. Maybe when they were babies, maybe stealing an egg or eating a juvenile, but what was actually taking on the adults? Well, if you've watched Walking with Dinosaurs, you will know. It is, of course, the Prehistoric. This is a huge carnivorous reptile that shared the landscapes of Patagonia with the Plateosaurus. And it's big enough and bad enough to take on a Plateosaurus, a fully grown Plateosaurus as well. Let's have a look at the size of this animal. So lengthwise we've got 5 to 7 meters, so about as long as a crocodile, 1.1 meters tall and weighing 300 to 600 kilograms. So it's definitely big enough to take on a Plateosaurus, but it also has a very robust skull and powerful jaws with dagger-like teeth. And it also has an armoured back, a bit like the scales of what crocodiles have on their back. And these scales would protect the animal from other predators and also from prey such as Plateosaurus when they're tackling them. And you can see there I just put in a cave. That's just for the Plateosaurus to rest in case it gets a little bit too hot. They can go and rest in that cave, go in the shade and get out of that intense heat. So put a nice little sheltering for them. The coelophysis can possibly join them in there as well. And now we've just got to tidy up these edges, put some rocks at the side of this little cliff here, at the side of the drop, and put in a few more trees and foliage, and then we're pretty much finished. All that's left to do is to make sure that we put all the fences in and make sure there's no gaps where the animals can escape and start wandering around the park. We definitely don't want that now. And we've just got to try and make all this area down here look as natural as we can possibly get it. And what I want to do around the side here, where this, you can see the path is sloping down to the ground level, and this is because what I want the guests to get a feel for is just how big the Plateosaurus really is, because at the moment they're looking down into the enclosure off that bridge and off the sides of the cliffs, and they may be able to get a good view, but I really want them to really get an idea just how big these animals are, and you can't really get a sense of that when you're up above them looking down in. So round the corner here I'm going to put some glass panels in. Now don't worry, it will be reinforced glass, so the animals won't be smashing out and rampaging across the park. I can assure you this is very strong glass. But it will give the guests a really good view. They'll be able to see right into the enclosure, and because they're on ground level they'll be able to really get a sense of scale of just how large these Plateosauruses really are. You can see I've just put the glass in there, and now I'm going to curve the path around, and then we're going to put some lovely little sheltered bits for the guests to just sit under and enjoy that beautiful view. So there you have it. The Triassic trek is complete. Our enclosure for our Plateosaurus and coelophysis is finished. And if you'd like to see this enclosure in more detail, then why not join us on a tour where we'll go around the whole enclosure as if you were a guest, and you'll get to see the animals enjoying their new home. And that'll be coming out very soon. If you'd like to check out some more builds that we've made on Prehistoric Kingdom, then why not check out our playlist, where we have lots of different builds to give you some ideas when making your own park. And there you can see the Plateosaurus enjoying his new home. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, leave a comment down below on what build you'd like to see next, and don't forget to subscribe for more Prehistoric Kingdom.